Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and you are listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC, right here on this Wednesday, November 8th, coming to you from Lubbock, Texas, in the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios, and on the radio at 98.7 Walk by Faith and 1420 AM Lubbock Christian Nation. Hope you guys have had a fantastic day out there. This has been great. It's been a great day at the Rock. We've been busy all day long. We started this morning early. We just finished about 10 minutes ago, and we are ready for the show. So it's been a great day at the Rock Health and Wellness Center. It's been a beautiful day in Lubbock, Texas. I hope you guys have had a good day yourselves. My last guy, JT, came in here, and he was like, "Hey, Doc, 50-50 today, huh?" And I just kind of laughed. I was like, "Yep, half the people love me, half the people hate me. That's balance in the universe. That's the way it's supposed to be. That's exactly how life is." So everything's right on track. So half the things are awesome, half the things suck, and we're all, that's the way it is. So we've had a good day. We have a good day recognizing that, and we've got a great show tonight. Wednesday is our book review night, and we've had some pretty cool book reviews so far. And what we do on this Wednesday nights, just in case you're new to the show, is we just take a few minutes and we try to share with you some of the books that I've read over the years. So I just take these books that I've read over the years that have made some sort of impact in my life, and I just try to bring them to you and see if it's something that, the take that I have on it might help you somehow. So and it's kind of fun for me because I get to go back and review some of these books that I've read. And the one that we're going to do tonight is called The 5 Love Languages, The Secret to Love That Lasts by Gary Chapman. And I'm really excited about it. It's a really cool book, and it's had a huge impact in my life and in my relationship with Leslie and with my kids, to try to understand how to be a better husband, how to be a better partner, how to be a better dad, those things that we don't talk about. And it's like one of my ladies this morning said, "Well, I can't wait to hear your show because I don't know exactly how you're going to tie that into medical." Right? And I thought that was kind of an interesting way of putting it, because it's not exactly how we try to do it, but everything that we do on the show comes back to the idea of the subluxation. And in chiropractic, the subluxation means interference in your nervous system, as far as I'm concerned. It gets a little bit more technical, but that's about the way that it is. And so when you're studying health, you just keep studying things, and there's so many different realms that come back to that same thing, interference in your nervous system. So when we address a book like we're going to address tonight, that book is a way of us being able to reach out and say, "Hey, look, your relationships have something to do with your health." There's no question about that. Your relationships, if you're in a bad relationship, if you're causing a bad relationship and you're in a bad relationship, that's going to affect your health. It's going to put you in a fight or flight response. It's going to put you in some sort of, your digestive tract's going to be all messed up. You're not going to be able to sleep. Your body's going to ache. You're going to have all kinds of irritability. You're not going to get along with people. Life sucks, all that stuff when you're in a bad relationship. And you might be in a bad relationship with someone you love, but you don't really know how to communicate with them. And that's what this book is about tonight. And it's so we're going to tie it in from that standpoint. We're going to tie it in from that idea that, hey, the relationship that you're in is going to have a lot to do with your health. And if you can make your relationship better, then you can make your health better. So that's that. And this is one of the most impactful books in my life. So I thought it'd be great to share on this Wednesday night of our book review night. So we're just going to get after it. One thing I want to start with is I want to make sure that everybody understands that I'm not a marriage counselor, and this is not a marriage counseling session. I'm a chiropractor. I'm a wellness chiropractor, and my job is to try to help you stay as well as possible. So that's what we're going to do, and we're going to share this this information with you. If you need a marriage counselor, please go find a marriage counselor. That's something. If you need some help with that, send me a text. I'll try to help you find somebody that can help you with your marriage counseling. But that's what we're going to try to do for you, is share this information so that you can have a better relationship. But just make sure you understand that I'm not your marriage counselor. So I want to just say that right up front. Same thing as I said when we went over the Body Keeps the Score book. I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, right? We've had some cool books. If you guys want to go back, you can go back to every Wednesday starting September 1st. September 1st was on a Friday. And you can go back to every Wednesday, and you can see our book reviews that we've done. So just look on your calendar and see what a Wednesday is, and then go back on Facebook at the Rock Health and Wellness Centers, or on YouTube at Health from the Rock. And you could just go back and you can find those Wednesday shows. And we had one on Alzheimer's, the end of Alzheimer's. We've had the one on The Body Keeps the Score. We had the one on Spark. We had the one on hacking of the American mind. We did the Bob Buford's halftime last week, I believe. And so this week, this one is the 5 love languages. So I think you'll enjoy this one. And so let's get after it. What does it mean? The 5 love languages. Well, it's a book about, and Gary Chapman is a marriage counselor, and it's a book about the way that we communicate with the person we're in a relationship with. And that relationship may be with our children. That relationship may be with our spouse. Most of the book is about our relationship with our spouse. And it's really talking about love. And we all want to be loved. We all want to. That's really what the whole thing is about, right? So when he just starts the book, he kind of explains he's actually on a flight from Buffalo to Dallas, and he was trying to get some rest on the flight, but the guy next to him turned to him and says, "Hey, what kind of work do you do?" And he said, "Well, I do marriage counseling and lead marriage enrichment seminars." Well, and the guy said, "Well, I've been wanting to ask someone this for a long time. What happens to the love after you get married?" And he said, "Relinquishing my hopes of getting a nap, I asked, what do you mean?" "Well," he said, "I've been married 3 times, and each time it was wonderful before we got married, but somehow after the wedding fell apart, all the love I thought I had for her and her for me seemed to have evaporated. And I'm a fairly intelligent person. I operate a successful business. Don't understand it." And he said, "How long were you married?" And the guy tells him, 10 years the first time, 3 years the second time, and 6 years the third time. And he said, "Did your love evaporate immediately after the wedding, or was it a gradual loss?" And the guy says, "Well, the second one went wrong from the very beginning. I don't know what happened. I really thought we loved each other, but the honeymoon was a disaster. We never recovered. We only dated 6 months. It was a whirlwind romance. It was really exciting, but after the marriage, it was a battle from the beginning. In my first marriage, we had 3 or 4 good years, but before the baby came, after the baby was born, I felt like she gave her attention to the baby and I no longer mattered. It was as if her one goal in life was to have a baby, and after she got the baby, she no longer needed me." And so this guy's on the plane, and he's talking to Gary, this author, and he's explaining to him how all 3 of his marriages just kind of crashed and burned, and he didn't really understand what had happened. And so Gary goes through it, and he starts to explain, and he had spent a lot of time studying, like he was an anthropology major or something at the beginning. So he studied lots of different languages, and he studied lots of different cultures around the world, and he studied them from a long time back. And what he said is like we communicate in language, right? Some of us can speak it better than others can. That's obvious, yes. But we communicate in language, and we have a language that we like to be loved in. and we have a language that we love in. So we speak words to try to communicate. And what Gary's point is in the book, he says, look, in the area of love, your emotional love language and the language of your spouse may be as different as Chinese from English. No matter how hard you try to express love in English, if your spouse understands only Chinese, you'll never be able to understand how to love each other. My friend on the plane was speaking the language of affirming words to his third wife when he said, I told her how beautiful she was. I told her I loved her. I told her how I was to be her husband. He was speaking love and he was sincere, but she did not understand his language. And that's what so I'll give it an overview of the book first, and then we'll get into each part of it a little bit. So what I learned from the book is that what Gary basically did is he narrowed it down to 5 different ways that we show our love, or we speak our love language. And in those 5 different ways, because let me go back real quick. One of the things I have in my notes is that psychologists have concluded that the need to feel love is a primary emotional need. And child psychologists affirm that every child has a certain basic emotional needs that must be met if he or she is to be emotionally stable. So remember when we went back and we talked about in the Body Keeps the Score book, how we talked about mirror neurons and how we talked about at an early age being nurtured and being seen and getting attention to the things that were bothering you and making you feel like you were being loved and being seen. Like that's a real thing. That's a real thing that happens at an early age in a child's development, where they start to understand that. And so this book is another book that echoes that same thought. It's like, look, it's an essential thing that we get love, right? And if we're missing it, and we missed it when we were young, it's hard for us to show it. And if we got it when we were young, we developed our love language for ourselves. And as a man, we don't have these conversations a lot. At least I didn't growing up. And none of I don't remember my friends having it. Like, no one talked about that. Like, it wasn't like we didn't all sit down in the locker room at Roswell High and have a conversation about how you loved your girlfriend or how you showed love to someone else. Like, I don't remember having conversations about that as a child growing up. That wasn't something that was part of school that we went to, or even in church. It wasn't part of like any part of it. I don't remember being taught. All I got to see is the example that we had in our house, the example that my friends had in their house, the example that my grandparents had, or my aunts and uncles. It's like that's kind of what we learned, that as a man, about how to have a relationship with a woman. And so what happened to me is, Leslie and I met when we were 12. And we started dating when we were 16, and we have a fairy tale life. It's an amazing relationship story that we've had. We've had a few little glitches along the way, and that was just because I was stupid. But for the most part, for the last 36 years, we've been together, and we've been happily married. We dated for 6, and we've been married for 30. But along the way, I was loving her based on the things that I got taught from my culture, from my environment, I guess from my music. Like, I don't know, did George Strait and Clint Black and Randy Travis have an effect on that type of stuff? Could have. I would think that's fair to say that that's true. So that's another way that you could look at it and say, that's where you learn things from. So you take all those things together. You take all those things together. I got to get to a point here, and you just learn. And it's like, well, you get married, and then all of a sudden, it's just not as fabulous as you thought it was going to be some days. And it's and as a man, when do we work on that? When do I say, all right, let's look, I got to be better as a husband. I've really got to try to be better as a husband. And what this book is what came along in my life. And I read this book and I was like, oh, like I see what that means. And so I just think it's important. I think it's important for men to understand that. And I think it's important for men to work on their marriage. And I think it's important for men to try to be, and I think you should be a man, but I also think part of being a man is to try to figure out how to love your wife and to create a home for your kids that's appropriate and nurturing and works and it lasts. And so this book taught me that. So let's talk about the fundamental parts of the book. The fundamental parts of the book are the 5 love languages. And what Gary says in the book, the author, is he breaks down the 5 love languages into these different categories. It says number 1 are words of affirmation, the way that we speak to each other. Number 2 is quality time. Number 3 is receiving gifts. Number 4 is acts of service. And number 5 is physical touch. And what he explains in there is that that's the way each one of us, he kind of narrowed it down based on his experience, but based on his experience, each one of us have one of those or 2 of those or all of those, but usually it's a primary and a secondary one, way that we love someone. We the words of affirmation, the quality time, the receiving of gifts, the acts of service, or the physical touch. And so, and so what do those mean, right? So each one of those has a way, and it's like, okay, in my relationship, when at the end of the book, and once you go through the book and you read he tells you all the examples, and you go through that whole thing, you get to the end, and there's a way that's actually a test. You take the test. He asks you a bunch of questions, and then you find out what your love language is. And then it was very eye-opening at the end of the book when I took this about how it was, because what I ended up with is I ended up with words of affirmation and physical touch. Those were my 2 love languages. That's the way that I felt like I was being loved, is words of affirmation and physical touch. Well, when Leslie took the test, she kind of was neutral. She kind of had equal scores among all of the areas, but I can tell you without a doubt, the number 1 area of her love language is acts of service. And so when you're a guy and physical touch is part of your love language, then you've got your hands all over your wife. You've got your touch is part of the way that you communicate love, right? And we're all mature listening to this show. I'm sure there's not any kids listening to it, but it's a serious thing. It's like, look, one of the sentences in here is the body was made for touch, and it's about that's part of me, right? That's part of me. It's part of sharing of me is that physical touch. And it doesn't have to be sexual. It could just be a hug. It could be like a hand on a shoulder. It could be holding hands. It can be just rubbing of the face. There's all kinds of ways that you can have physical touch. And the other one that was my love language is words of affirmation. And so what I learned from this book is that we tend to love our spouse in our love language, not in their love language. So if you take the test and you're a man and you take the test and you get the answer to your test, and then let's just say you have those words of affirmation and physical touch, you're going to want to love your wife in that manner. You're going to say words of affirmation to her all the time. And that's what I do with Leslie almost every single day. I tell her how beautiful she is, or how cute she is, or how sexy she is, or what she looks cute in that outfit, or I pay attention to her hair and her shoes and her fingernails and all that stuff. Like, I'm always telling her, I'm reinforcing with words, either through her physical being or through saying thanks for something, like something that, hey, appreciate you. You're a wonder wife or whatever, like superwoman or whatever. Good job today or whatever. Some sort of words of affirmation that I'm saying. But it's almost every single day. I mean, literally for 36 years, it's almost every single day for 36 years. I've told her that she looks good. It might be a half a dozen days a year, maybe, for most of those 30 years that she tells me that I look good. It's the funniest thing. It's like, and so she that's not her love language. Well, the way that she loves me is she takes care of me and like whatever I need. Like, she ran herself ragged today all over town, taking care of me. She runs the front of our office. She tries to handle all the patients that we take care of. She handles all the phone calls and all the text and everything at the front. She goes and gets me lunch. She goes, fills up my tea. She brings me coffee if I need it. Like, while I'm adjusting patients, she's going to go take care of supper tonight when I get home. There's going to be something to eat at home. Like, she does the laundry at our house. When I open my sock drawer, there's just socks in my sock drawer. Right? I don't do the laundry. She does the laundry. Sometimes I'll fold my socks and put my socks in there, but for the most part, I don't ever do the laundry. Leslie handles all that stuff. Now, we've been together a long time, and we've kind of figured out what works for us in different ways. But she is one of those people that acts of service is the way that she shows her love. It's not in physical touch, and it's not in physical touch and words of affirmation. Sorry, I was getting a text right there. And so that's what, for a long time, I would get frustrated before I read this book and before I understood this book. I would get frustrated because I was trying to, I would love her in my love language, but I wanted to be loved in my love language. And that wasn't her love language. And it was really interesting because you would say something nice to her, you give her some sort of words of affirmation, and it didn't mean anything to her. You could kind of tell. It was like it wasn't really something that was a big deal to her. And I was like, that's really funny. It's like I didn't I was all frustrated because she wouldn't love me in my language, and I wasn't loving her in her language. You know what goes a long way for her? If I just pay attention to her just a little bit and then do something good for her. Like, do the dishes, take care of her for once. Take her out to dinner. Go get her a new pair of shoes. Go do something she's one of those that has all 5 of the love languages. So words of affirmation, quality time, receiving gifts, none of them are super huge. It's an accumulation of all of them together. And so you got to pay attention to her and try to say, hey, look, what's going on with her? Because what I know about women, and that's not very dang much, I can tell you that. But what I know about her is she's going to get attention. She needs attention. And it's not a hating type of thing on my spouse. It's just saying that, hey, look, you better pay attention to that girl. You've been paying attention to her since she was 16, and you better pay attention to her, or things she's going to go get attention somewhere else. If I get too busy with life, she's going to go get attention somewhere. She's going to go do something else. And that's part of her feeling like she's not loved. Well, for me, it was words of affirmation and physical touch. And so I was feeling like I wasn't loved. And so you get the combination of that together, and it's like we have this fairy tale relationship together, and we're in this feeling to that we're not, like we're missing out on something, like we're not loved. And so all of a sudden we got the book, and we both read the book, and we both figured out which each other's love language was. And when we figured it out, I started to understand. I was like, oh, okay. So now, after 36 years together, I will remind her, hey, you know what? I look pretty good today. I'll be getting dressed in the morning to I'll be about ready to leave the house or something. And I'll say, you know what? I'm looking pretty good today. And she'll just smile and look at me, and she'll say, I was thinking that. And she might be thinking it, but she's not going to say it because that's not in her love language. So we have figured out a way that I could just remind her that my love language is words of affirmation, and she might just say something nice to me every once in a while. It would go a really long way. So, hey, we got a break coming up on the radio. You guys hang on just a minute, and we'll be back in just a few minutes with the second half of the show. And you guys on Facebook, hang on one second. I'm going to try something on my camera. I've been working on this camera. No, sorry. I know my voice and the video are off on this camera, and I have worked on that and worked on it. If you guys have any help out there on that, I've got somebody trying to help me. I've upgraded. I've upgraded my service. I've checked on my camera. It's a 4K camera. I don't know. I haven't figured out exactly what's going on with it, so I apologize for this. I know that it's irritating to try to watch, if you're watching it, but and maybe that's maybe it'd be easier to watch if it was that way, but it sure seems like it's wrong. Um, the guy that's helping me, yeah. So I apologize for that. We'll get that fixed. I've talked to my internet provider. I've tried to figure out a better way to get more speed. We got as much speed that we can have coming here to the office, and I've got a new computer. It's like I can't quite figure out exactly what I'm doing wrong on that deal, but I will try to keep working on that and see if we can come up with the best way to get it fixed. So I apologize for that. Thank you for watching. If you got any questions or you got any comments about the show and you'd like to send us a message, feel free to do that. You can chat with us. You can send us a message on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, X, and I'd be glad to try to answer those questions. And I know several of you are watching the show back later, and um, you're leaving me messages later on in the evening or throughout the next day or over the weekend or whatever. And so I try to get those at least acknowledged in some form or fashion as we go along. So if there's something that you'd like to talk about, and if you also, just like some of the conversations that we had throughout the week, if you have something that you would like, a topic that you would like to talk about, I'd be glad to research that for you too, talk about it, and and share any ideas that I might could come up with about what you might like to talk about. So um, I know that that's something that sometimes sometimes I'm focused on one thing, and I just it kind of just filters through into the show, and there might be something that, like, one guy came in today and asked me, he's got bone on bone in his ankle, and said, "What do I think about an ankle replacement?" And so it's like, hey, we could talk about ankles. We have some some technology in the office called the Dolphin, and that we use today, and we actually worked on some scars, and so that's an interesting experience to work on the scars. So we got lots of stuff we could do and lots of things we could talk about. So if there's something that you want to talk about, let me know. Okay, everybody. Hey, we're back. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and you're listening to Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. This is our book review night, and we're coming to you, and we're breaking down the 5 love languages. And the 5 love languages are, this is the way that you communicate to your spouse, and your spouse communicates to you in the language that they are in. And if you're not speaking the same language, there's going to be friction between the two of you. That's basically what the book taught me, is that there's going to be friction between the both of you, and that's going to lead to problems down the road. And you could take a perfectly good relationship and ruin that perfectly good relationship simply because you don't understand what your love language is and what her love language is or his love language is. And then now it's like all of a sudden we just ruined a perfectly good relationship because we didn't take the time to figure out how to love that other person. So what the book is about is teaching us those things. So let's talk about some of them specifically when we talk about words of affirmation. So he starts off the chapter and says, Mark Twain once said, "I can live for 2 months on a good compliment." If we take Twain literally, 6 compliments a year would have kept his emotional love tank at an operational level. Your spouse will probably need more. One way to express love emotionally is to use words that build up. Solomon, the author of ancient Hebrew wisdom literature, wrote, "The tongue has the power of life and death." Many couples have never learned the tremendous power of verbally affirming each other. Verbal compliments or words of appreciation are powerful communicators of love. They are best expressed in simple, straightforward statements of affirmation, such as, "You look sharp in that suit," or "Do you ever look incredible in that dress? Wow. I really like how you're always on time to pick me up at work. Thanks for getting the babysitter lined up tonight. I want you to know I don't take that for granted. You can always make me laugh." Those are all little things that are words that we can speak to one another, that if your spouse if their love language is words of affirmation, it will go a long way. And if you really think about that, I always am talking about our why. I had a patient ask me today, "How do I quit snacking on Reese's cups at night?" Because that's what my go-to. And I was like, the first thing you have to do is you have to develop your why. What difference does it make? Because if you don't, then you won't. But if you do understand your why, and you can understand, and I've said this on the show before, probably the number one decision-making person in my life over the last 36 years has been Leslie. If you look back at all the decisions that I've made in some form or fashion, there's a handful of major decisions that I made that probably I made for a different reason, and I didn't consult Leslie, and most of those things ended up blowing up on me. They ended up as bad decisions. But the ones that I made, like, man, when we're getting along with each other, which we do most of the days, when we're getting along with each other, as long as I know that relationship is sound and is there, and that she loves me, I can almost do anything. I can endure anything. I can go anything. I can work. I can read. I can study. I can keep going. I can keep going. I can keep going, and I can keep going, as long as I feel like that foundation is right there. Like what this whole thing is about is on a solid rock. And on those days when it doesn't feel like that's right, man, it is really hard to make it through the day. And I know you guys have been through divorce, and I know you guys have been through death, and you've lost your spouse, and like everybody's had the full gamut. And so I know the people out there know what I'm talking about. I know if you're listening to the show that you totally understand that there's days when, like, when you feel like you're being loved and when you feel like you're in a relationship that means something, you really can make it. Like, you can make it every day. Like, you can endure the hardships, you can endure the failures, you can endure the horrible things of life, you can make it. And when you don't have that, it is really hard to make it through the day. It's really hard to get motivated about it's just about anything, right? And so it's one of those deals. It's just kind of like, if just a word, if your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, just a word, a positive word to them would just go a long way. Just something small. It doesn't have to be big. It could just be something small that you said, that you acknowledge them in the way that they love to be, that they loved. Now, one of the things that we have to be careful about when we're, according to the book, when we're loving each other is, like on the acts of service one, that it's like it's a really close call between a doormat or a lover, right? When you have a spouse whose love language is acts of service, you better be careful with that, because it's not acts of service out of intimidation. It's not acts of service out of dominance. That's really disgusting. And I know a lot of guys like that. I've known a lot of guys like that over my lifetime. And I've seen that. I've seen that in family members and in different relationships that I've seen over the years, when the woman has a love language of acts of service, but the man is using that in a dominant way over that woman. And that's not the way that it's supposed to work. The man should take responsibility to understand, if he has a spouse that has a love language of acts of service, that they should be responsible and mature with that, because you got to be careful. Like, just like I talk about, when we talk about Leslie does the laundry or whatever, she gets my coffee or something like that. That's not a dominant, male chauvinistic, you're a punk kind of sentence that I'm saying right there. That's not it. That's the way that she shows her love, is she does that stuff. And while she's doing that stuff, I'm working. And that's part of the way that I show my love for her, is my acts of service is at work. It's not like she's going to go get supper tonight, or she's going to make supper. She's handling supper, and I'm just going to the bar on my way home. And then when I get home, I expect supper to be on the table. See, that's an old school, jacked up way, if you ask me. That's something that I've seen those type of relationships over my lifetime, and I just don't think that's the way that it ought to be. That's not very mature as a man to do that. So if you have that woman, you got to be careful with it. So, and you also don't want to manipulate through these love languages. You just simply want to show your spouse that you love them in the way that they understand love. You want to speak. If they speak Chinese, you want to speak Chinese. If they speak English, you want to speak English. Now, I know that from a man's standpoint, married to a woman, and I'm sure the women would say the same thing about the men, but from a man's standpoint, sometimes we speak English and you think they speak English, but they speak Martian or something like that. Like, you thought what the words you meant is what they understood, but you learned that that's not what you meant. So that's just an aside right there. Okay, so the first one is words of affirmation. There are different ways. There's encouraging words, there's kind words, there's humble words, not demands. I'm not demanding. I'm being kind and loving to try to use words of affirmation. And another thing that he says in the book is, he says, hey, if words of affirmation is the love language that you need to speak, you might consider the idea of writing things down when you hear them. Make a notebook. Write things down as you go along. If you hear a song, or you see something in a movie, or nowadays if you're looking at your phone and you're watching YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and you hear a conversation and somebody says something and you think to yourself, wow, that would be a cool thing to say to my spouse. Like that would be a nice way of saying something nice to them. That might be something to do. So keeping a notebook, that's one of the ideas that he had in the book. Another thing that he had in the book was to to say something nice about your spouse to someone else when your spouse is not around. Make sure that you watch the way you talk about your spouse, because if you say something nice about your spouse, it's likely to get back to them one way or the other. And if it got back to them that you were really saying something nice about them, it would be really awesome for them, right? So it would be a really cool thing if if they actually had someone that came up to them and said, your husband said something really nice about you. That would make their day, right? That would be something that would be really cool for them. So that's words of affirmation. Verbal compliments are far greater motivators than nagging words. So that's what it's talking about when we're talking about this idea of words. Be encouraging, be nice, speak something loving to your spouse so that it really makes a big deal to them. Okay, the second one is quality time. And so, sometimes you say, well, you look good in that dress, and man, you sure are pretty today, or man, sure, thanks for getting the supper, or thanks for handling that for me, or whatever. And your spouse's love language is quality time. Well, if quality time is the love language, they don't care about those words of affirmation so much. So he starts off the chapter. I should have picked up on Andrea's primary love language from the beginning. What she was saying on that spring night when I visited her and Mark in Little Rock. Mark doesn't spend any time with me. What good are all these things if we don't ever enjoy them together? What was her desire? Quality time with Mark. This was about from the chapter before. She wanted his attention. She wanted him to focus on her and give her time to do things with her, right? That's if you've got a spouse that quality time is their thing. It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter acts of service. It doesn't matter if you go do all this stuff for them. If you don't spend any time with them, they're going to feel unloved. And that's a really good point. And by quality time, this is from the book. By quality time, I mean giving someone your undivided attention. I don't mean sitting on the couch watching television together. When you spend time that way, Netflix or HBO, that's funny because this was copyrighted in like 92 or something like that. Yeah, 92. And he redid it multiple times along the way. But he says, if you're spending time that way, Netflix or HBO has your attention, not your spouse. What I mean is sitting on the couch with the TV off, looking at each other and talking. Devices put away, giving each other your undivided attention. It means taking a walk, just the two of you, or going out to eat and looking at each other and talking. And he can always tell when he's in a restaurant who the lovebirds are, who the people who are in a relationship in the beginning of their relationship. It says it right here. Have you ever noticed in a restaurant, you can almost always tell the difference between a dating couple and a married couple? Dating couples look at each other and talk. Married couples sit there and gaze around the restaurant. You'd think they went there to eat. Yeah. So it's like, if quality time is the love language that you need to be speaking, that's a tough one. And that's a tough one with the phones today, because everybody's wanting to get to their phone, right? It happens in my office all day long, every day. People can't put their phones down. They have to be in there looking at their phone all the time. We always have to be checking our phone. And if you're not careful and quality time is part of the love language, but man, that's a big one. That's a big one right there. And quality time can be focused attention, quality conversation, learning to talk. At different times in our relationship, it seemed like the only time we really had serious conversations is when we got in a fight. And it was almost like I'd just pick a fight just to have a deep conversation. It's like just find something to fight about, pick up some old nonsense that was in the past, and then pick a fight about it, just so that we could make up, just so that we could have a good, deep, solid conversation about something that actually got her attention. And so that's maybe how I got my words of affirmation was to try to do that. So if learning how to talk is doing two things together, it's words of affirmation in a certain form, because you are affirming that we do have a good relationship because we're talking to each other, and then it's also um, creating that bond when quality time is important. And then in the chapter of quality time, he explains the difference between. He has a chapter called or a part of that called Dead Seas and Babbling Brooks. And this was really, really funny because he talked about the Dead Sea. You know, nothing's alive in there. It's just quiet and still, and it's just there's nothing going on. But if you went up to a mountain and you stood next to a brook or a river in a mountain, and it's like it's going over the cobblestones and the rocks and all that stuff, right? As the water trickles down the mountain, it makes a lot of noise. And he called that a babbling brook. And he said what's typical in a relationship is a dead sea gets along really well with a babbling brook. And I don't know if you guys would recognize this or not. In our relationship, I'm the babbling brook, and Leslie would be the Dead Sea. She doesn't hardly talk. She just is one of the most quiet people that I've ever been around. And sometimes people have misunderstood that because she's somewhat shy, but she's really introverted. She's great with people, but she just is by nature, she's introverted and she doesn't talk. So what happens is when these two people hook up together and they go out on a date, the babbling brook loves it because the babbling brook gets to talk the whole time. They can keep the conversation going because they get to talk the whole time. And the Dead Sea loves it because they don't ever have to say anything. They can just sit there and they don't have to come up with anything to say because the babbling brook is doing that for them. And when we got to that part of the book, I thought that was hilarious. Like I literally busted out laughing. I was like, yeah, that's exactly Leslie and I. And I've seen it in lots of our friends, our couples that we know. And it's really kind of funny how those two people fit together really good. Now, here's a challenge. If the Dead Sea's love language is not words of affirmation, which is probably, I don't know if he put that together or not, but it's probably very common that that's a thing. They don't have words. They don't use a lot of words. And what's really funny is Leslie's awesome at Scrabble. Like she's played Scrabble with her grandma and she's like super awesome. She's smart as heck. And she does all those word games. And I tried to play Words with Friends with her like 2 games and she crushed me like 400-6 or something like that. And finally, I just quit in the middle of the second game because I was like, this is miserable. It's not about just making a word. It's about trying to defend the position of the game. And she's relentless when it comes to that type of deal. But she's not a big speaker of words. And so the babbling brook in the Dead Sea, it might work out really good for your relationship. And you guys know it. If you're one of those people, then you already know that's who you are, right? And so I thought that was really funny. It was in the quality time thing. The Dead Sea doesn't have to come up with a conversation. The babbling brook will carry it. And then the last thing in that chapter was the quality activities. Find something that is really a quality activity if your person is a quality time person. The next one is gifts and receiving gifts. And this one is really tricky because this is my daughter. My daughter is a gifts person. And if you're not careful, you misunderstand this love language. You misunderstand it as being a brat or something, or spoiled rotten or whatever, which my daughter and my wife are both spoiled rotten, but and not that I'm not, because but whatever. But when it comes to gifts, Caitlin just lights up. And like if you just get her anything, if I came home and I just had some a special little pen or something, or a notepad, or something that I thought of giving her, it just changes her whole personality. And she just lights up, because in that love language, it just means that you were thinking of her. When you get her that little gift, it doesn't have to be 50 cents. It could be something I made. I could make up my own card and get it for her. And you would just light up. And in the book, it talks about receiving gifts, but um, in real life, Caitlin's, man, if she has the opportunity to give a gift to someone, it does the exact same thing. Like it doesn't matter if it's a sorority sister, if it's one of her best friends, if it's anybody. If she has the opportunity to give someone a gift, it just lights her up. And so if you've got a person in your family and their love language is gifts, it's gonna mean a lot to them if you just get them just something little. The chapter starts out. Eric spent a year in Kelsey's friend zone before she agreed to go out with him. Since they were both big baseball fans, Eric took her to a minor league game in Indianapolis. They were sitting in a grassy area beyond the left field fence when suddenly a hard hit drive came their way. Eric jumped up and made an impressive barehanded catch, his first home run grab ever. 2 days later, Kelsey found a gift wrap package outside of her dorm room. She opened it up and found a baseball in a small plastic display case, the kind collectors use. Taped to the inside of the case was a ticket stub from the game. Inscribed on the ball was the date of the game and these words: first home run catch, second best thing to happen to me that day. Like, how sweet is that, right? That's an awesome way to, like, give someone whose value is gifts, give them something that really means something to them. Now, the other thing is this: if your spouse is not, if gifts is not that thing, that's their love language, then they're really not going to be all that excited to get it. The first 24 roses that I gave Leslie, I gave her a dozen roses one time, and she acted like she was just like, thanks. And then she just kind of set them over on the table. And back in the day, it took me forever. I was making like $2 an hour or whatever, getting paid in the 80s. It took me forever to get enough money to buy those roses. I worked so hard to get those roses, and I took them over to her house and I gave them to her, and she was just like, thanks. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate it. It's just that it wasn't her thing, right? But if I'd done that for Caitlin, if I bring her those flowers, it would have made a big difference in her life. So gifts is the next one. And then acts of service. And we've talked about that, right? Acts of service is just doing something for someone, just showing them in their love language that you care about them, and understanding that just something, just pick up your socks. Like, dude, if you're a guy, pick up your shoes and socks and put your socks in the hamper. Like, come on. Like, don't leave your underwear laying in the bathroom floor. For goodness sakes. Like, have some couth, as I like to say, right? It's like, man, come on. Like, don't make your wife have to handle all that stuff, and don't give her that excuse that you're working and like you ain't got time to pick up your socks. That's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard of, right? So, as a man, we could show our wife some acts of service that would be fantastic for them. Just a little bit of help. Just a little bit of help will go a long way when it comes to that love language. And then the last one, we're kind of running short on time, but the last love language is that physical touch. And physical touch does not, once again, it doesn't have to be sexual. Obviously, it can end up being sexual, and that's part of the deal, right? Between married people, but it doesn't have to be that. We have known that physical touch is a way of communicating emotional love. Numerous research projects in the area of child development have made that conclusion. Babies who are held, stroked, and kissed develop a healthier emotional life than those who are left for long periods of time without physical contact. We know that from our other book. Physical touch is also a powerful vehicle for communicating marital love. Holding hands, kissing, embracing, and sexual intercourse are ways of communicating emotional love to one's spouse. But for some individuals, physical touch is their primary love language. Without it, they feel unloved. But it can just be holding hands. It can just be putting your hand on their shoulder. Any sort of way that you can show that physical touch would be good. So the moral of the story is this: figure out your spouse's love language and love them in the way that they love. Figure that out, and it will really help the way that you get along with your spouse. It's really a big deal, and it really makes a difference in your relationship. You can also understand your kids' love language as well, and there's a book that goes along with it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. We're running out of time, and I will see you guys tomorrow night. Yeah, so I want to say this at the end. Um, this guy's written multiple books, but one of the books he's also written is about the love languages of children. And we also, when we read this book, we immediately got that book and had the kids take their love language test. And Jacob's love language test is more of that, that same type of deal with me. It's like it's more of a physical touch, words of affirmation type of deal. And Caitlin's is gifts. There's no question about it. And so if you want to understand your children, it might help for you to understand their love language. So there is a book specifically for children. I think it's a great book. It's been it's been fantastic in my life. It really has helped me to understand Leslie, and I think it's helped Leslie understand me. And you put those two things together, she's gotten better as the years have gone by. She does actually every once in a while tell me I look cute in this shirt or something like that, or I appreciate you working hard or whatever. And so, but just because she didn't mean she didn't love me. It's just not the way that she showed her love, right? So if we can understand that, we might be able to get along with our loved ones better. So hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hope you have a great night. I'll see you guys tomorrow night at